Hey everyone, my name is Tristan and welcome to my workshop. This year I made a lot of Star Wars stuff and I really enjoy it. Some of the things I made were clone trooper helmets and people have been asking me if I would also make the armor, and yes, that was my plan all along. So in this video and the next video, I'm gonna show you how you can make your own clone trooper armor completely out of EVA foam. I'm specifically making the realistic armor, the one shown in the movies, because that's the design I like the most. As far as I know, both the phase 1 and 2 movie versions of the armor look the exact same apart from the helmet, so you can make one armor and switch out the helmets if you want. If this build interests you and you want to follow along, you can purchase the templates over on my Etsy store. Like for all of these helmets, the templates were pulled from 3D printed clone armor, so they're really accurate. Make sure you watch the whole video because I use some interesting techniques and you might learn something new. So it's time to make the first half of a clone trooper armor. We'll start by making the arms, and you'll need all the template pieces from file number 1. I'm assuming that if you make this armor, you already know how to trace templates on EVA foam, so I did all of that off camera to keep the video from being too long. To cut out the pieces, I like to use a box cutter and a hobby knife, both really sharp. Some parts have inward and outward angle cuts, so pay attention to the cutting guide so you don't cut the wrong angles. Also, all of the angle cuts are around 40 degrees. Now that everything is cut out, let's make a pauldron using the two pieces you see on screen. Start by heating up the parts using a heat gun and form them into a compound curve. I like to form my pieces over a round object. Once the parts have the right shape, I use contact cement to glue them together, starting with the darts. Simply apply the glue to the two surfaces you want to stick together and wait for the glue to become tacky. Then you can stick the surfaces together and that's it. After closing up the darts, I attach the two parts together to finish the pauldron. I like to reheat the finished piece so I can form it into its final shape. All the parts on a clone armor have rounded edges. To achieve that look, I'm using my rotary tool. You'll have to make two identical pauldrons, so here are mine, all finished. Let's move on to the biceps. You'll need the three pieces you see on screen. First, heat up the pieces and form them into the right shape. After that, you can glue the bigger piece to itself to form a cylinder. Then glue the two smaller pieces together as shown on screen. And finally, attach them to the back of the cylindrical piece. Just like the pauldrons, this part needs curved edges all the way around. If you have trouble getting a clean edge with the rotary tool, you can heat seal them with the heat gun. Of course, you'll have to make two bicep parts, just make sure to mirror the second one. It's time to make an elbow guard. You'll need the four pieces shown on screen. The rectangular piece needs 2mm trimming on both sides. You can glue them on using super glue. Then, like for the other parts, you have to heat form each piece into the right shape. After that, glue them all together using contact cement, but only glue the rectangular piece on one side. That's because you have to try on the elbow guard and mark how much material to remove so it fits you properly. Make sure you can still bend your arm. Now, simply cut off the excess material and glue the piece on the other side to get a finished part. Of course, round off the edges, but not the ones on the rectangular piece. The elbow guard has two little recessed lines right here. To achieve the right effect, I use my wood burner with a straight tip and a metal erasing stencil. Erasing stencils are super cheap and really handy for carving details in foam. And after making a mirrored version of the same part, your elbow guards are finished. Let's move down to the hand plates, which are really simple. Only two pieces are needed to make them. All you have to do is glue them together using contact cement and round up the edges with the rotary tool. Make a mirrored one and you're done. Now let's make a forearm. You'll need those three pieces. Like for every other piece, start by heat forming them into the desired shape. Then glue the triangular piece on one of the bigger pieces and then stick the other big piece on the other two. Make sure to get a clean seam here because it's a very visible part on the armor. Then you can round off the front and back edges, make a second mirrored part, and you're done. I did include the pattern to make a communication pad, but I would highly suggest you use a 3D printed or resin cast one if you can get your hands on one. The details will look much better than one made from EVA foam. If you want to make one out of foam, here are all the pieces. Unfortunately, I did not record the assembly process. As you can see, mine is way too thick, so I changed the thicknesses on the templates for you guys. Once your communication pad is finished, you can simply glue it on the right forearm, and that's what you should end up with. And just like that, all the parts for the arms are finished. Those parts are surprisingly easy and fun to make, and you can probably make all of them in just one day. It's time to make the parts for the chest, and you'll need all the template pieces from file number 2. As with the arms, I already traced all of them on the right thicknesses of EVA foam, and I'll cut them out using a hobby knife and a box cutter. You can start by separating your big sheet of foam into smaller pieces, which are much easier to work with. This piece right here is a special one. Start by cutting out all the sides except for the big curved edge. This one right here starts as a straight 90-degree cut and transitions into a 45-degree outward angle cut. I start on the 45-degree side, and as you can see, I slowly tilt my blade up until it's completely perpendicular with the table. Here's how that cut should look. By the way, you'll have to cut out 2 of those pieces, one mirrored of course. It's time to assemble the abdominal section, and you'll need the 4 pieces you see on screen. First, you need to modify this piece. It needs 4 holes on each side. To achieve that look, you can use a drill, but a cleaner way to do it is using a wood burner with a sharp tip. Make sure you wear a mask when burning EVA foam, it's really bad to breathe in. Now, you have to cut on the 2 lines to get 3 separate pieces. After that, take the centerpiece and round off the sides using the rotary tool. Finally, you can glue everything back together, but make sure the side pieces sit about 3 mm lower than the center one. This gives a nice 3D effect with a smooth transition. It's time to round off more parts. Start with the 2 shorter sides of the backplate and then the front edges of the 2 side pieces. This is what you should end up with. You can then heat form those pieces using the heat gun, but you only need a simple one-way curve. Then glue the 2 side pieces to the front part we worked on earlier. Make sure the centerpiece sits 3 mm lower than the side pieces to get the right effect. Then glue on the back piece 3 mm higher, but only on one side. Now is the time to make the abdominal section fit you properly. Start by putting it on and overlap the back piece on the side piece. You have to be comfortable and still have some space inside the part. Next, simply trace where the piece overlaps using a Sharpie. Measure how much material you need to remove and mark half of that length on one of the side pieces. Then simply cut off the excess foam. Now go to the other side and cut off the back piece. This lets us use the foam we just removed from the other side as a guide to remove the same amount from this side. I simply mark the spot and cut off the excess material. Once you're done, you can glue the back piece on the side pieces. I glued mine on both sides, but keep in mind you have to add Velcro later to be able to put on and take off that part. And now you have an abdominal piece that fits you perfectly and is symmetrical on both sides. It's time for the most complicated part of the video, the chest plate. You'll need the 8 pieces shown on screen. Let's start with the pectoral pieces. Both need a little bevel where they connect. To achieve that look, simply remove some material at a 45-degree angle using a box cutter. You might need to clean up those cuts with the rotary tool. This is what you should end up with. Now let's assemble the chest plate. As you can see, the 2 pieces here have inward angle cuts, and that's a mistake on my part. The angle should be around 45 degrees, but now it's 90 degrees, which is way too much. I changed that on the final templates, and only the piece on the right has an angle cut. So now you can glue those 2 pieces together and do the same for the mirrored ones. And finally connect them in the middle. Now you can glue this small trim piece to the bigger piece. Those form the lower half of the chest plate. Once you're done, you can attach the 2 assemblies together. Take your time on this step because it's a pretty tricky part to assemble cleanly. This is what you should end up with. Finally, you can glue the 2 pectoral pieces and attach them to the lower half of the chest plate. This step is also pretty tricky, so take your time. And now you have a completed chest plate. As you can see, this seam is kind of a weak spot. To fix that, I glued in a small piece of corrugated plastic with the corrugations perpendicular to the seam. You could also use a thick piece of foam. I decided to heat form the chest plate after assembling it since it doesn't have extreme curves like some of the other parts. I really curved the top straps and the sides. And here is the chest plate all finished. Let's move on to the final part of the video, the back plate. You'll need the 7 pieces you see on screen. We'll start by adding the details on the center plate. Start by drawing all the details on your piece to make the process easier. For the 4 circles, I'm using a sharpened PVC pipe. Simply push it into the foam and twist it until you cut all the way through. After doing this for all 4 circles, I glued them back in at a 5mm inset using super glue. Let's move on to the rectangle on the right. Start by cutting the whole thing out, then separate it into 3 pieces. The 2mm details on the center pieces will be achieved using a thin 2mm foam piece. I simply apply glue in the right spots and bend the 2mm foam piece following the curves of my drawing. I cut off the excess after each detail is finished. This is what you should end up with. Now you can glue the side pieces back on at a 5mm inset. And finally glue that finished part back into its original spot. The final details to make are the 2 slots on the left. I tried cutting them out as cleanly as I could, but they weren't perfect, so I cleaned them up using the rotary tool. Next, all you have to do is score some lines into a small piece of 5mm foam, open the cuts with a heat gun, and glue that piece behind the slots using super glue or hot glue. Now score in the frame that surrounds the details and open up the cut with heat. And here you go, the center part of our backplate is finished. It's finally time to glue everything together, starting with the top piece. Then attach the 2 side pieces, and finally the lower piece. Now that the center plate is surrounded, you can glue on the bigger top piece. This one is pretty tricky, so take your time. And finally, carefully attach the lower piece to the rest, and the backplate is pretty much finished. Like for the chest plate, I heat formed the backplate after assembling it, and I only formed the top and sides, not the center. And the last piece of the video is finished. You still have to make it fit you, so take the straps and stick them on with duct tape. Now you can put on the armor. Make sure you keep one side lined up and overlap the other side. Then you can trace where the 2 pieces meet using a Sharpie. Just like we did for the abs, measure how much material you need to remove and mark half of that length on one side of the backplate. Then you can cut off the excess foam, trace it on the other side of the backplate, and remove that material too. The chest plate was sitting a bit too low for me, so I decided to shorten the straps by about 1.5 inches. The straps are supposed to be cut out from 2mm foam and then get covered by 4mm foam with rectangles removed from it. This takes a lot of time and I was on a rush to finish this armor for Comic-Con, so I just glued on 2mm foam trimming going across the straps, which are 5mm thick. You can follow what I did or go with the more complicated option, both work totally fine. And now you can glue the straps to the chest and back plates using contact cement. And of course I had to round up the edges on the abdominal part and the chest and back. And with that done, the upper half of the armor is finished. Here it is. Of course mine is painted because I finished it a couple weeks ago. As far as the upper half goes, it's a surprisingly easy build. It does look intimidating, but there's not that many pieces and they all fit together really well. So as I said at the start of the video, the templates to make this armor are now available over on my Etsy store along with many others. And for the first 2 weeks after this video comes out, the templates will be on sale at 20% off, so better get them now. And if you want to see more of what I do, things that don't always make it into my videos, you can go follow me on Instagram. All the links will be in the description. Of course, the second part of this build is coming very soon, so stay tuned. But now this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, you can leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more cool builds like this one. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye.